What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's video where we're going to be doing some Nighthaunt 4th edition Battletome Wishlisting and predictions. For today's video we're actually going to break it down into 4 different sections, and these are going to be the certain, which are things that we definitely know are going to happen and we've got some evidence to back that up. We're going to look at the pretty certain, which are things that we can guess. There is some evidence out there to suggest that these things are probably more than likely going to happen, but they haven't yet been 100% confirmed, and some of it is slightly open to some interpretation. Our third section that we're going to look at today is Daydreams, and these are things that we'd like to see, or just stuff that we're kind of making up, a bit more sort of far stretched. It's not 100% guaranteed, but it would be nice to see them if they did happen. And the last section we're going to look at is the lost, and these are things that we might lose from the changeover from our index into the Battletome. And with those 4 topics laid out, it is quite important to say that obviously a lot of these things, especially in the Daydreams and the Lost sections, are going to be things sort of heavily based on my opinion, and anything that's not completely factually already confirmed is going to have that sort of opinion weighed down upon it. And what I'd love to do with this video is, if you guys think slightly different, or maybe there's something that you've heard on the grapevine that I quite haven't, then please do let me know in the comments down below. Share all of your thoughts with myself and the wider Nighthaunt community. Anyone checking out this video, what you think might be happening, or what things you would like to see changed in the Battletome coming. I mean, the Battletome is probably, seeing how close it is, we're like a month or 2 away at most, already printed and done. Anything that we put out here probably is, it's already set in stone and beyond our sort of comprehension to be able to change anything, but we can still play that little wild guessing game before it actually arrives on our doorsteps. So with those 4 sections laid on out, let's get on into today's video. Okay, so our first section is going to be the certain, and these are things that we know and are backed up by sort of information that we've actually had confirmed. And the first thing of this is obviously that we are getting a Battletome, and I know what you're thinking, Alex, like, of course we're getting a Battletome, like that's, just guaranteed how it is. The index is turning into Battletomes, but hey, that's technically a thing that Nighthaunt are getting, is the physical Battletome. I'll bring up the roadmap, the most recent one, that's got some slightly different information on it. When we first obviously heard that Nighthaunt were up on the roadmap, it was just the Nighthaunt and the IDK, the Idneth Deepkin, on the coming next section, and the Blades of Khorne and Kharadron Overlords were on the horizon teaser over there, with kind of only a bit of the picture being shown. So we knew that Nighthaunt's been coming for a little while. We're at the stage now where Soulblight Gravelords have just had their army box come out with all of the new sort of different skeleton units, and I think we can use Soulblight as a way to sort of predict some of the things going forward that's going to happen with Nighthaunt, and as we get to those moments we can draw those comparisons. But I don't think that Nighthaunt's going to be quite on that same level of release. Obviously, like I just said, Idneth Deepkin, and we can see it on the roadmap, are on the coming next. And with the older roadmap, where those 2 were just on there without Blades of Khorne or the KO, it does lead me to believe slightly that we might see Nighthaunt and IDK actually come out in like a joint box with both sort of factions that are, obviously IDK is a bit of a smaller range, but compared to us, like unit for unit, but I think they're both quite well-rounded factions with the respected units that we currently have. So we're probably both going to see like a new hero, maybe a unit, with some little updates here and there, and it might even come as a joint release. So rather than like with Soulblight where they got their full army box dedicated to themselves, we might see Nighthaunt versus IDK in kind of like a face-off box like we used to get. Those old FOMO boxes, as they were called, because it was the only way you could get the new heroes and stuff at the time, and then we might get our stuff together in that kind of thing and that kind of style of release, because yeah, I don't think actually as a faction Nighthaunt are going to need all too much. We already have quite a few units and quite a them are really well, and it's more a place of like balancing what we actually need in terms of our units playability over actually adding to the faction. But there are a few things that we're going to get. And the only other thing that I have for the certain list, and that is the new terrain. Now this was confirmed obviously when the Soulblight were taught that they're getting terrain. It's something that we're seeing a lot of in 4th edition. Factions that don't have their own faction terrain or their own endless spells, manifestation lore, are now getting terrain and manifestations added to their roster. Of course, our Nighthaunt range already has our own endless spells and manifestation lore, so instead we're getting the terrain, bring them up on the screen. And these are really cool. These are really nice looking terrain pieces. Obviously they very much fit the whole older aesthetic of things that we used to get with the Garden of Moor and those kind of terrain features. It's slightly disappointing to see that this is pretty much the same as the Soulblight one. They're both coming in a box where you can build either the Soulblight one or the Nighthaunt versions. The only difference is they slightly change the aesthetic, and obviously they're drastically different in the 2 different styles that Games Workshop painted them in on the box art to be able to tell them apart. And I feel like that's a bit of a missed opportunity. It's nice to actually get some faction terrain for Nighthaunt. Obviously it's something that we're missing, but I feel like we could have got something a lot cooler, a lot more unique. Obviously the mausoleum kind of styled graveyard faction thing goes really well with any death army, but you know, when you see faction terrain, like when you think, even just looking at the other undead factions, you look at like OBR where they have the Bone Tithe Nexus, you look at something like Skaven where they have their gnaw holes, and the terrain feature itself, as soon as you see it, as much of if you're a faction if you're a fan of faction terrain or not, like you see those pieces and they immediately scream out, you know, you see that Bone Tithe Nexus, that looks very much like an OBR thing. You see Skaven gnaw holes, they look very much like a Skaven thing. And I just feel like it was a little bit cheap, a little bit lazy for Games Workshop to kind of just copy and paste Soulblight and Nighthaunt to essentially have the same thing. We could have had like a Well of Souls or something like that. Something very Nighthaunt, very unique. Again, not knocking these models at all, like they actually look really cool as terrain pieces. They're really nicely done. It just feels, it kind of just takes the shine off it a little bit for me, that we're getting pretty much copy and pasted with the Soulblight ones. But something is better than nothing, right? I mean, we didn't want to be the only faction left out with no terrain in an edition where everyone is getting their terrain. So those are the 2 things that I know for now are 100% certain. Obviously we're going to be getting the Battletome update, and we're getting new terrain that's already been confirmed. So let's move on to things that are pretty certain, and these are things that, again, we've seen little bits, snippets here and there of things that haven't 100% confirmed these things, but we can like 95% with a good gut feeling say that these are probably going to happen. The first one is one that I think a lot of Nighthaunt players are very, very excited for, myself included, and that is going to be a new Hex Wraiths. The main thing that we're going to see from Hex Wraiths, and why these are on the pretty certain list, is Black Knights for Soulblight Gravelords have recently been updated, and we now see that the new Barrow Knights have replaced them, and that's something that's pretty interesting. I think Nighthaunt, we might see something the same, like Hex Wraiths might actually disappear as a unit. The 5-man style cavalry unit isn't going to disappear, but like how Black Knights now technically no longer exist and they've been rebranded as Barrow Knight, we might see that with Hex Wraiths, where they're no longer called Hex Wraiths. They might get a completely different name, function in the same way, essentially be the sort of same unit, same war scroll with slightly changed rules, but they won't actually be Hex Wraiths anymore. And that's something that I think we see quite a lot of going forward, with the expansion of the old world. I know that they said Vampire Counts isn't actually going to be one of the sort of staple factions, but it does look like a lot of things from the Vampire Counts range of back in the days of Fantasy Battles is now sort of being ticked off of the list and removed from AOS, and they kind of sneakily lining it up in the background to sort of surprise return Vampire Counts one day. And Hex Wraiths and Black Knights, again, were in the same box set. It was one of those sort of dual kits where you build either or. So now that Black Knights have been replaced, it would be a very expensive thing for Games Workshop to try and remove the Black Knights from the frame, because they're very much integrated in together, and then release the exact same Hex Wraiths in a standalone box, and then have Barrow Knights. So yeah, I think Hex Wraiths are definitely going the way of the dodo and are going to be sort of removed from the line. And I would not be surprised if we don't even see Hex Wraiths return, but instead see a brand new named cavalry unit that's pretty much going to take their place. and then that opens the door for Games Workshop to return the exact same Hexwraiths / Black Knights 50/50 kit if they decide to return vampire counts in the old world, because they're both very much part of that roster. Next up on the pretty certain list is a new hero, or possibly a new unit. I have absolutely no idea. I've got two pictures that we've seen. These are from the Rumour Engines. They were released December 2023, I want to say. They look very Nighthaunty, and you can tell that by the sort of the way that the hands are. They've got those kind of sickly, spindly kind of arms and hands that a lot of our units tend to have, and with the kind of like ethereal ghostness look on the poison vial and the smoke coming out of the other bottle, is very much lends itself to, again, that aesthetic of Nighthaunt stuff going forward. And the reason I'm not 100% sure, like saying that this is going to be a new hero would be the easiest call, because then they can, again, if we get that thing where it's released alongside the Idneth Deepkin, it's easy to put a new hero in with some existing units and make the kind of two forces that way. We've seen that a lot in the past. But the thing that I can't get my head around is in that one picture with the kind of the vial dripping into the bottle with the skull, there's already two hands. And then in the second one, where it's the glass turned upside down and the sort of ghostly smoke's coming out of it, it's like, that's technically a third hand. So are we going to get some kind of like weird kind of ghost with like 4 hands or something, or 3, or like what's going on there? Or are these actually two separate miniatures that make a unit? Or are they going to be sort of 2 heroes on one base? Like, is it like a mini diorama kind of thing going on? There's so many like doors of possibilities I think they could come out for that, and that is quite exciting in its own right. The last thing that we saw for Nighthaunt was the Warcry unit, the Pyregeists, and that was the kind of thing, like, it looked like, again, we were going to get a hero, and that actually turned out to be a whole Warcry unit of itself. So again, this might possibly be something for that. I do think that they are, again, going to be something for Nighthaunt, just by looking at the kind of the aesthetic look of the hands and the arms. But as to whether that's going to be a hero or a unit, that is anyone's guess, in my opinion. But I would love to hear what you guys think about those ones going forward. And either way, even if it's not even a Nighthaunt thing at this point, although, again, put it in the pretty certain category, because just the way that it looks, I would be very interested to see what these models actually are, because those bits that we can see do look really, really cool. So number 3 on our list, and this one is going to disappoint quite a lot of Nighthaunt fans, I'm sure, but that is, I don't think we're actually going to get a ghost monster. Those of you who've been around sort of Age of Sigmar or the Nighthaunt range for quite a while will remember the Mourngall. From release, that was something that was part of the sort of monstrous arcanum from Fantasy Battles that got imported over to AOS, and we lost him quite a while ago. Been a couple of editions now without him, and he was our big sort of staple monster of the faction, and a lot of people want something like that to return, whether it's the Mourngall coming back itself, or a new imitated version of it, or even just something completely different. It's a big thing that I hear a lot of the time. People want a big, scary, ethereal themed monster for their Nighthaunt armies. And we got the new, with the Soulblight range, we've got the new Undead Dracoth. There's the mounted version with Prince Vordry on there, and there's the unmounted version which has a Regiment of Renown attached to it and can be taken among the other undead factions. So you can basically put that unmounted dragon into your army, and I think for now that's all as close as we're going to get to having a big scary monster in our Nighthaunt armies. And as disappointing as that is, because obviously it's basically the zombie dragon redesigned. It's not like a big ethereal thing. Rules wise, it's, you know, not going to tie in as well with the Nighthaunt as we'd like. But it still opens up the possibilities for converting something or painting it into a style to make it look more sort of Nighthaunt aesthetic. Make it your own ethereal dragon rather than an undead sort of flesh dragon. That kind of, you know, look and feel. So it is a way to still be able to put the monster into your army, a little bit of conversion work, a little bit of paint magic, and again, you can get that looking like a ghost monster. But after seeing the Regiment of Renown rules come out for this, I think that is pretty much sealed the deal that we're not going to be getting a big Nighthaunt monster of our own, although I would love to be proven wrong with that and see like a big Nighthaunt monster get dropped on release with the new stuff. And that's going to sum up the things that I think we're pretty certain about. So obviously we're going to get new hex race, whether they're renamed into something else, that new hero or new unit kind of thing coming from the rumour engine, and sadly no ghost monster, because the Dracoth Regiment of Renown is going to pretty much be our way to put monsters into Nighthaunt. So let's move on into the third section. This one's going to get a bit more sort of opinionated and hopefully a little bit more exciting, and that is the Daydreams section. So these are things that we'd like to see. We don't exactly have any evidence about any of this at all, pure speculation and things that would be really cool to have in the tome. And I'm going to open this up with one of my spicy opinions. I've put this in the Lakey Wargames Discord, and it's like a 50-50 kind of thing. Tears people down the middle whether they agree with this one or not. But I would personally love to see remakes of the easy to build kits for our units. So that's things like the Mirmorn Banshees, the Glaive Wraith Stalkers, and possibly the biggest one of them all and the most spicy take is Reikenor the Grimhailer. And I must say that I love all of those miniatures. Like, I love the Mirmorns, I love the Glaive Wraiths, even though they've always been awful, and Reikenor does look like an absolute beast. But the thing that really annoys me with the easy to build stuff is the fact that they're so integrated into those bases, and the bases are really busy. The Dreadblade Harrows are another one. The actual harrows themselves, both the rider and the mount, perfect. The bases are really cool. And all of the easy to build kits for Nighthaunt have that same thing. They were all, you know, pretty much the starter stuff in first, when Nighthaunt got their first Battletome 3 Battletomes ago. You know, and they're all themed the same, so if you get those units and group them together, they don't look out of place. But then the other half of the range that aren't the easy to build kits all have plain bases, and it just, those easy to build kits are so integrated into those bases, they're really hard to remove and put on just plain bases, so you can do your own basing, make your own theme, make them match other things in your army. It's not impossible to do, but again, it's also not the easiest thing to do, and I think it would just be nice to sort of wipe the slate clean and just kind of bring the rest of the Nighthaunt units back into that kind of line of matching themselves again. And so again, remaking those easy to build kits so they're just more like standard kits rather than easy to build kits with those really heavy kind of integrated bases would be really nice, just to make it easier to tie everything in together. And with Reikenor, Reikenor the one that I actually really like his base, because he's kind of jumping off of that, he's like balanced on that broken statue. Again, the little graveyard bit on the bottom is cool, but it would be nice to just, you know, it'd be easier to have it all tied in with the rest of the army and the plain bases. But the other gripe that I have with Reikenor is the wings on the miniature, and especially compared to like all the other Games Workshop kits that you see, like the lack of detail in the wings on Reikenor. I'd love to just copy and paste that model over, get rid of the bottom area of the base, keep the statue, and just add some more detail into them wings. You can keep the rest of it the same, that's no problem. Is that going to happen? Probably not, because that's a lot of redesign and work on Games Workshop's part for not a lot of payoff. So I'm sure maybe many editions from now, when those units actually get full on replaced, they change the poses and do way more than just messing around with the bases. Which I don't need to do right now, because the models themselves are all fantastic, apart from Reikenor's wings. So yeah, that's one that's probably not going to happen, but yeah, it's my kind of spicier pick of bullying those easy to build kits a little bit more. The second thing I have on the list of Daydreams, and this one is one that I'm sure everyone will probably agree with, and it would just be nice if the Battletome, and I have to raise my hands and say Games Workshop have done a great job with this kind of thing in the past. It's something that every time there's a new Battletome that comes out, it's like the first thing on my wish list every time, and that is that the Battletome still just feels like Nighthaunt. Now what I mean by that is things, you know, they're ethereal, they're fast, hard to lock down, so you know there's lots of movement shenanigans going on. There's death healing, because that's something that's been nerfed quite a lot recently, and which is fair enough, because 3rd edition we had quite a lot of the recursion element of it was being abused. We've seen it recently with Flesh Eater Courts, where theirs was a little bit toned up, and it can be a little bit oppressive at times for those sort of armies that have loads of healing and recurring models versus those that don't. Balancing it can be a pain in the backside, so I totally get it. but it is very thematic of Death Armies to have that healing, and I think it's a shame we keep cutting it down and losing it. Then, you know, it kind of spoils the theme a little bit. And again, even with Ethereal is either everyone's best friend or their worst enemy, because having that 4+ unaffected by rend, you can either roll the 4+s all day, every day, and nothing ever dies, or you'll have a game where you never make a single 4+ save and it feels like everything's made of paper. And that's just kind of the slot machine of playing Nighthaunt with the Ethereal rule the way it is. And there are, you know, I've seen some things where people have put out like alternative ideas, of how Ethereal could be a thing, and try and have it more balanced, so it's not kind of that slot machine version of it. But I think the whole, just in general, the design of, you know, not being affected by rend in the same way that most mortal beings of Age of Sigmar are, is just something that makes Nighthaunt Nighthaunt, and I think it would be a real shame to kind of lose that in the way that it is. And the same with the whole increased movement speed. You know, a lot of things in the Nighthaunt range are movement 8 base, where a lot of infantry are like 5 or 6. So things like that, with a retreating charge. Obviously there was a major controversy about that at the start of 4th edition, because the stars aligned for Nighthaunt, where the rules were strong. We fitted into all the battle tactics really well, and the missions, and it kind of just played into our hand a little bit too well. So we have to obviously scale that back, but those are the things, in my opinion, that make Nighthaunt feel like Nighthaunt. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an ethereal being that should be able to like phase through walls and do all kinds of good spooky ghost things. And again, the rules do kind of reflect that as they are. We've had lots of nerfs and changes to things, and I think Games Workshop are doing a good thing of bringing that into line. But I just really hope with the Battletome they don't kind of double down on that too much, and then just completely freeze out that feeling of Nighthaunt being Nighthaunt. So yeah, hopefully the book will still feel like Nighthaunt when it drops. Number 3 on the list of Daydreams is a small, tough unit. And this is something I did a video before, at the end of, like near the end of 3rd edition, for when 4th edition was coming around. We did a similar video to this where we were wishlisting things that would have become what is now known as our index. And I said that I'd like to have like a small elite unit, something that, say, like kind of like how Immortus Guard are for OBR, or how Trolls are, or Troggoths are for Gloomspite Gits, you know, that kind of small, bigger footprint unit. It's a bit tankier, does a bit more, sounds a lot like Spirit Hosts, right? But maybe they've got something like more tricks up their sleeve. So, you know, maybe they've got a 3+ ethereal save, maybe they can self-recur, you know, just that kind of like low model count, but that tough, cool unit. And again, we might not even need a unit for that, because as I've just pointed out, we pretty much have that in Spirit Host, but Spirit Host rules have obviously been designated to that kind of bodyguard way of life for Nighthaunt. So their actual like offensive output is, you know, not great. I mean, they do a whole number of attacks, 6 attacks per model, 4s and 4s, but no rend 1 damage. So they can spike, you know, you reinforce them up to a unit of 6, and they're all throwing 6 attacks each with the crit auto wounds. So you can, if you roll really well and your opponent rolls really bad on their saves, actually dish out quite a lot of damage with Spirit Hosts. But laws of averages, and, you know, from a competitive side point, Spirit Hosts just aren't that unit for that reason anymore. They used to be when we could do more wounds on 6s, but that was a lifetime ago. And my brain still goes there with a lot of the things, and I need to stop thinking of that. But I think it would be cool to have a unit in that kind of role again. Something, you know, just something different, like how chain wraps are kind of, or should be more numerous. I know they're locked down to 10s at the moment, but they should basically be sort of what like zombies are to Soul Blight, and then the rest of our infantry are kind of, you know, that skeleton to Graveguard level, Barrow Guard level, I suppose we should say now. And then, yeah, we should have that kind of smaller, more elite kind of scary unit that's in there. And again, that could just be Spirit Hosts, but then you would really need to tweak the rules for those. And the last thing on my Daydreams list, and I'm not going too wild with the kind of speculations and stuff, things this time around. I think I kind of pulled my head from the clouds a little bit, because a lot of the index or the Battletomes from the indexes are pretty much the indexes reprinted, and things are sort of kind of shorn up with a little bit of sprinkling here or there. Although saying that, the Soulblight one that we've just seen, which we're referring to a lot throughout this video, but obviously being a fellow Death faction is nice to draw comparisons from. It's probably been the most shaken up one in terms of unit roster that we've seen so far. All the ones that have come before it, Slaves to Darkness, Stormcast Eternals, has been kind of, you know, although Stormcast had a lot of their range removed and then re-added, changed the aesthetic of things that way. But yeah, for Nighthaunt, so one thing I'd like to see for the Battletome on the Daydreams section is just well-rounded rules, and this is something that I spoke about at the beginning when we said about possibly being in with the Idoneth Deepkin as a kind of army versus army box instead of getting our own complete release, because I don't think we're going to get that many changes. And that is, the Nighthaunt range itself already has a ton of different units across the scale, but a lot of our stuff seems to really overlap. So for example, when you look at our infantry choices, it always comes down to, do you want to play Bladegeist Revenants? Do you want to play Grimghast Reapers? Do you want to play Dreadscythe Harridans? They're all 1 wound, movement 8 infantry. They attack in slightly different ways, but at the end of the day, they're all still 1 wound, 4+ ethereal saves. They all kind of do between 2 and 3 attacks, possibly up to more. They all float around the sort of 3s to hit, 4s to wound, or 3s and 3s, or, you know, that kind of element. You know, nothing's like going down to 2s and nothing's up at 5s unless they get hit by certain buffs or debuffs. But you know what I mean. They're all kind of multiple attacks, average hit and wounds. They're all as tanky as each other. They all come in 10s, reinforce up to 20s. They all are slightly different, but at the end of the day they pretty much all do the same thing. And what I would love to see is just take the units that are already pre-existing but give them like super defined rules. I remember with the first Battletome that we ever got in 2nd edition, I want to say, when Nighthaunt become a fully fledged faction, I remember when Bladegeist Revenants could only be taken in 5s. I'd like to see maybe something like that return. Bladegeist come in 5s, but maybe give them 2 wounds each. Maybe give them crit mortals instead of crit auto wound. You know, really shake it up, make it different, because at the moment all of the sort of infantry feel the same. We get a lot of choice in our heroes. You know, the difference between taking Reikenor to taking Lady O, taking Alrich, like they all have such diverse elements when you're building your army, and can really define how things go, which is how a lot of Death factions are. We've always been kind of overruled and systematically like put into our sections through our heroes, which is fine because they're the kind of, you know, overlords leading out the spirits of the rest of the army. Not so much like free thinking troops, because, you know, it's all under Nagash's will, etc, etc. But again, we already have so many different units and so many various things. But rules-wise, we all kind of play the same. And we touched on it just slightly a minute ago with Chain Rafts, where, you know, that should be the big horde unit. They're rubbish. They've got the 5-up ethereal save. They've got no rend on their attacks. But again, they come in 10s. They're a 1-wound infantry unit. They are the same movement as all the other guys. They just do slightly less output. They're a little bit cheaper. Not that much cheaper, but a little bit. And it just makes it feel all the same. And yeah, I really think that we could go onto kind of really extreme levels of going one way or the other, especially when it comes to the infantry troops, and that would really push out the different sort of avenues of play once you combined in that element of how different all the heroes play from each other. And it just opens up more doors, more army list construction, more play styles. And just, yeah, rather than copying pasting things throughout the sort of army that way. And in that respect, if we were to do that, that would make it feel different enough that we wouldn't have to keep adding in more units to the range, because we'd already have that diversity built in. And unit wise, we're already quite a big, numerous army, especially when you compare us to other factions. Obviously not Stormcast, because Stormcast dwarf everyone in terms of unit count. But then you look at certain factions like KO, like Fire Slayers, even like Flesh Eater Courts, although, you know, they got a nice additions to their units last edition when their range got refreshed a little. But like, we already have quite a lot of stuff, especially hero wise. It's another reason why I might be excited that in the pretty certain section we spoke about that new hero, possibly a new unit. It would be more exciting to see a unit than a hero, because the last thing Nighthaunt need is another foot infantry hero to add to the list of things. So again, if we could round out the rules and have more defined unit roles, more kind of specialty units with our rules, rather than everything kind of feeling the same, that would be really, really nice. And those are the 4 things I have for the Daydreams section. Again, not kind of the spiciest picks, although apart from the easy to build stuff, but that's probably not going to happen. That's definitely a Daydream one. And again, I feel like that's just the difference between going from the index to the Battletome, trying to be a little bit realistic in those kind of expectations, and a lot of it is just, you know, not losing the feel of Nighthaunt and just really rounding out the rules, I think, is what Games Workshop needs to nail with the Battletome. Just kind of, because they did a pretty good job with the index in my opinion. It just needs shoring up with those kind of units and just adding that little bit of diversity into what we already have, and I think we'll be in a great spot going forward. And yeah, I think that's all it really needs to be. But let me know in the comments down below, what are your daydreams? Go as crazy as you like, and just really let me know what kind of things that you would like to see for Nighthaunt. And with that said, we're going to move on into the last section of today's video, and that is the lost, things that we might actually lose going from the index to the Battletome. And we're going to start off with slimming down on heroes. Again, this isn't something that I don't think we need to see, or I would want to see, but you know, it's an interesting space to talk about in case it does happen. Again, using Soulblight as that big example, we've just seen Prince of Ordrai's got the new model. They're pushing that kind of thing. You know, there's certain elements of Age of Sigmar where they want heroes to step forward, and certain kits are obviously stepping backwards. Whether they're lining up for that old world return of vampire counts, we'll never know. But I think that puts slimming down on heroes possibly with the Khan Wraith and the Tomb Banshee. They're 2 really older models that could probably do with resculpts. You know, make them something a bit bigger, a bit more thematic, a bit more exciting. But those are 2 models that could quite easily disappear, which would be slightly disappointing, because with the index they actually got cool for the first time since before we ever had a Battletome. When Nighthaunt was first a thing, before the range became out, we were literally like 5 units. We were Hex Wraiths, we had the Tomb Banshee and the Khan Wraith for the heroes, and Spirit Hosts, and that was it. And then they added the Knight of Shrouds on foot when Malign Portents came out, and then after that we had the Mongol as well. I lied, there were 6 during Malign Portents with the Mongol as well, and that was the entire Nighthaunt range at the time. And then obviously the first Battletome dropped, Lady O, Reikenor, all the other good stuff that we know and love to this day came out. So yeah, the Khan Wraith and Tomb Banshee could potentially disappear. They just got some cool rules in the index, being able to lead Grimghast Reapers and Mirmorns respectively, but I think that's just kind of like a patch over thing, make them a bit spicier, be able to give players that kind of element of being able to use them. That's a space that I'd like to see them play into. Again, in the Battletome, I think it's cool, it adds more options, and that's never a bad thing. But as we spoke about, heroes, especially foot infantry heroes, is something that Nighthaunt already have a ton of. If that new thing from the rumour engine is a Nighthaunt foot hero, then this would just be an easy way for them to get rid of 2 of the older models, 2 of the fantasy battle range, because everything else in our range, I believe, apart from Spirit Hosts actually, is all new. It's all Age of Sigmar themed things, and obviously the Black Coach is something that was brought across, but it's been re-envisioned, redone. So it's a new model version of it, so they just bring the old one back if they wanted to do old world. And yeah, so those are 2 heroes I think we could see. And that also brings to the second point, which again, Spirit Hosts is one. I've heard this one, someone said this in the Discord, that they might get rid of Spirit Hosts, and I was like we're going to go on a witch hunt if that happens. Spirit Hosts are the guys, they are the G's, they are awesome. One of the reasons that I fell in love with Nighthaunt was just spamming Spirit Hosts, and that's why a lot of my opinions are Spirit Hosts should be awesome again. But again, that's the example of another thing that could disappear potentially, because it's the only other thing that's an old world purge from the Fantasy Battle days. But I don't think Spirit Hosts would actually go. If anything, they might bring back the old 3 like single. They look like the inflatable wacky arm guys outside of the front of a car sales place. I'll bring up a picture if you guys don't know what I mean. But they're like the old Spirit Hosts. Maybe they'll come back. We get to keep these ones that everyone loves to build. No one's ever said a bad thing about building the current plastic Spirit Hosts kit ever. But yeah, so potentially those are things that we might lose. We could add Hex Race to that list again, because if Hex Race, they're not going to actually go away as the unit that they are, but they might be rebranded into something else, like we saw Black Knights become Barrow Knights. So technically we could put Hex Race on the kind of the RIP list alongside that, although they'll be reincarnated as something else to replace them out and out. And I think that's about it. Everything else is just too new for our range to think that we're going to lose. And if they do the thing where they round up and reassure some of the units like Glaive Wraith Stalkers that have always been useless, although they keep trying to give them something cool with the whole Stalk rule and the mechanic, it's just never quite landed, and there's always just been things that are better. So if we can really round out the rules and define things into a way that makes everything usable, everything you want to use everything in that kind of regard, then that would be really, really nice. And again, we wouldn't need units to drop out and come in if the ones that we had, like our roster, was just everything was usable, and you get that kind of headache of, I don't have enough points because everything is so cool and I want to use everything, but it won't fit into one army. So instead I have to build a bunch of different styled lists and kind of swap things out, but it's all just as good and it's all just as usable, and it gives you that kind of army building decision making of being able to pick things and build different avenues, rather than the kind of pitfall that 4th edition has of just, oh, this is the one build that actually works and everything else is trash, and you're already like 5 steps behind if you don't build the optimal list and copy and paste spam the one good thing that's working. So yeah, I don't think we really need to lose any units in that regard. We just need to lose the kind of crappy rules and then re-envision them in that regard, and that would be totally fine and sort of fix the thing and the problems within the Nighthaunt range, in my opinion. And speaking of things that we lost that might return, going back to the new terrain that we're going to get, I would really like to see, for those of you who've played the older editions, when Nighthaunt had the summoning from the underworld, it was basically like the coming out of the graves mechanic that Soulblight has, where as you're deploying units, you just put one off to the side and say, these guys are going in the underworld, and then they would pop up. You just deep strike them onto the table later on. I really do think that that might come back. Again, we can put that in the pretty certain range, possibly. With the new terrain, where maybe we'll be able to summon our units, deep strike them onto the table, you know, be sort of within X amount of inches of the terrain piece and away from the enemy, etc., etc. With that, and that would be nice to see, because that's something that we lost in the index, the underworld summons, and we lost in the 3rd edition Battletome, wasn't it? It was the other 2 editions, the other 2 Battletomes before that we had underworld summons in. So we lost those a little while ago, and I think it would be nice to have that come back. But yeah, it's been a little while since we've had those, and I don't think it would be the end of the world if we didn't. But that's a really cool kind of, again, thematic Nighthaunt thing of ghosts just kind of appearing and coming out of the walls, and you know, you got those mausoleum pieces down on the table. It would just make sense for spirits to rise on out of them. So yeah, that could be something that's was lost and maybe returns. But that's going to wrap it up for today, guys, because I've been rambling on for quite a little while, even though we had a bit more of a structure today. I seem to always go the distance with just talking things and probably repeating myself 101 times, but I apologize for that if that's the case, but I just kind of get caught up in my own head talking through these things. But let me know what you guys think about the Nighthaunt, the list that I've come up here with the Nighthaunt wishlisting and predictions. What kind of things have you heard or would you like to see? Or if you haven't even thought of anything, you know, you don't have any ideas just yet, What do you think about things on the list of stuff that I've come up with? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's get talking about it. If you want, there's a Lakey Wargames Discord linked in the description below. It's free to join. We have a whole bunch of different sort of Age of Sigmar areas and different hobby areas. So it's not just a Nighthaunt thing, but we've got a lot of Nighthaunt players in there, and we're talking all different kind of Age of Sigmar and other game systems as well. As we go through, so come join the discussions, comment down below or in the Discord, and let's get talking about these things, because either way it's exciting to have the new Nighthaunt Battletome on the way, and when that drops, obviously we're going to do lots of coverage about that. I had a few personal things get in the way of actually being able to cover the index as much as I would have wanted to. We did the 2 full deep dives in between, and yeah, it just kind of feels a thing to not deep dive tactically the units now, because it's all going to be redundant in a month or two's time. But when that Battletome drops, we're going to go heavy on the kind of tactics and in-depth things as a book as a whole, and then unit by unit really break those down like we used to. I think it was 2nd edition, 3rd edition when we did those, but we didn't quite get to do it for the index. But we will do that for the Battletome when it drops, and that is an exciting time ahead. So yeah, we're going to crack on with that. Let me know what you think down below. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe. Happy wargaming.